On my 35th birthday, I sat alone in front of a lemon raspberry cake with my name written across it and 7 empty chairs staring back at me. The night before, my mother had promised that everyone would be there, but when I finally called her, she was laughing at my sister's engagement dinner. "Mara," she said, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "We had more important plans." I did not cry. I took a photograph. 1 month later, that same woman placed a microphone in my hand in front of 90 guests and waited for me to apologize. She did not know that inside my purse was a cottage key, 6 years of property tax receipts, and a check I had no intention of cashing. But that night, none of that had happened yet. At 6:15, I arrived at Harlow and Finch, an old steakhouse in the center of town where the lamps glowed green against white tablecloths. I had reserved the round table in the back for 8 people. I had even printed small menus at the library, one for each place setting, because I had wanted the evening to feel thoughtful without feeling extravagant. The cake waited in the kitchen, lemon with raspberry filling, white buttercream, "Happy 35th, Mara," written carefully across the top. I had confirmed the reservation twice, once in the family chat and once with my mother by phone the night before. She had laughed at my carefulness and told me not to fuss. "We will be there," she said. I had still believed her completely. At 6:30, I sat down. At 6:40, I told myself traffic was bad. At 6:50, I sent a message to the family group chat. "We're in the back room. Table is under my name." The message showed as delivered. Then read, "My mother saw it. My sister Lydia saw it." Neither answered. At 7:15, the waiter asked whether I wanted an appetizer while I waited. He was young, perhaps 24. With the careful kindness of someone who had already understood the situation, but did not want to embarrass me by naming it. "I'll give them a few more minutes," I said. At 7:40, he returned and relit the candle in the center of the table. It had already been relit once before. He did not ask where anyone was. That silence felt both merciful and unbearable. By 8:00, the kitchen sent out my birthday cake. 8 forks had been placed around it. I stared at them longer than I should have. 7 forks for people who had promised to come, 1 for me, the person who had believed them. At 8:20, I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. Music spilled through the phone before she spoke. I heard glasses touching, a burst of applause, Lydia laughing, and a man tapping a spoon against a glass as if he were about to make a toast. "Mom," I said, "where is everyone?" There was a pause, but not the kind that comes before guilt. It was the pause of someone deciding how much explanation another person deserved. "Oh, honey," she said lightly. "Connor proposed to Lydia. His parents are only in town through Sunday, so we had to put together an engagement dinner tonight." I looked at the empty chairs. "You told me everyone was coming." "I know, but this came together quickly. Why didn't anyone tell me?" My mother sighed, patient and soft. "Birthdays happen every year, sweetheart. An engagement only happens once." Somewhere behind her, people cheered. I asked again, "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice lowered. "Because we knew you would make this about you." For a moment, I said nothing. It was my birthday, my cake, my reservation. My family had left me waiting for nearly 2 hours, yet somehow I was already being accused of wanting attention. I looked at the 8 forks arranged around my name. "I understand," I said. I did not mean that I agreed. I meant that, finally, I understood. The pain came later. First came clarity, cold and clean. After the call ended, I stood beside the table and took 1 photograph, 7 empty chairs, 8 untouched forks, my name in white icing, and the candle still burning. I knew my mother, by morning. The story would become a scheduling mistake, then a misunderstanding, then something I had overreacted to. In my family, the past had always been clay in her hands, but a photograph was clay already fired. It would not change shape so easily. Before that birthday, I had spent 12 years working nights in the pediatric cardiac intensive care unit at St. Catherine's Hospital. I had learned how to speak softly when parents were terrified, how to make decisions under pressure, and how to stay steady when everyone else was falling apart. I had seen love arrive in quiet forms, a father sleeping upright beside a crib, a mother counting breaths through the night, a nurse holding a frightened child's hand after her shift ended. At the hospital, people knew what I did. A month before my birthday, our unit completed a state survey with no deficiencies. My coworkers brought a cake into the break room, taped a banner to the wall, and applauded when our manager thanked me for helping prepare the team. At Sunday dinner, I mentioned it between the salad and the roast. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said. "Pass me the bread basket." Then she spent 20 minutes describing Connor's interview in the Hospital Foundation magazine. Connor, Lydia's boyfriend, had been photographed in his white coat beside a surgical wing. My mother had ordered extra copies. That was how attention moved in our family. Work that looked impressive in a photograph was celebrated. Work done quietly was absorbed. During the days before my birthday, my mother called to ask whether Dad should take his blood pressure medication before a fasting appointment. Lydia emailed me a venue contract and asked me to check the cancellation clause. Aunt Diane sent a picture of an insurance bill and wanted to know why it had been denied. Dad asked me to reschedule his cardiology follow-up because he had lost the office number. I answered every question. When I reminded them about my birthday dinner, Dad responded with a thumbs up. "Lydia sent a heart," my mother wrote. "Stop worrying. Everyone will be there." Everyone remembered my number when they needed an answer, but when I only needed them to show up, their answers became shorter. Jasmine noticed the pattern before I admitted it. She asked whether I wanted to invite more people from the unit to Harlow and Finch. "You know, half the hospital would come," she said. I told her no, not because I had no friends. My coworkers were planning to bring cake on my next shift. I had people who texted me after difficult cases, brought soup when I was sick, and remembered how I took my coffee. But that dinner was meant for my family. Harlow and Finch was where my grandmother Rose used to take me when I was a child. I wanted to know whether my parents and sister could come to one table where I was not organizing, driving, fixing, or rescuing anyone. For once, I wanted to be the reason people arrived, not the person who made their arrival possible. I did not lack people who loved me. I was still waiting for the people who had hurt me to prove they could change. 2 years earlier, I had been the first person to notice that Dad's color looked wrong at Easter lunch. He insisted he was tired. I insisted he see a cardiologist. 3 weeks later, he underwent coronary bypass surgery. I took 9 days off work. For the first 3 nights, I slept in the cardiac ICU waiting room. After he moved to the step-down unit, I spent 6 more nights in the chair beside his bed. I organized his medications, drove him to rehabilitation, and kept a notebook of blood pressure readings until he could manage everything himself. When he recovered, my mother stood during a church luncheon and said, "Our family got through it together." My name was never mentioned. That evening, she hugged me in the kitchen and whispered, "I don't know what I would do without you." At the time, I thought that was love. Later, I understood it was a performance review. Rose had been different. She owned a cottage near Geneva on the lake, with faded blue shutters, zinnias along the fence, and a porch swing that complained whenever it moved. When I visited as a girl, I automatically looked for something to clean or carry. Rose would stop me. "You don't have to help here," she once said. "You can sit on the swing all afternoon if you want." Her cottage became the only place where I was allowed to exist without being useful. After Rose died, the property went into a family trust. Dad was the lifetime beneficiary. After his surgery, my mother became successor trustee. Lydia and I were named as the remainder beneficiaries. The cottage key stayed on my ring beside my house key and hospital badge. I did not know that 6 years later, my mother would use that key to ask a question she would never say aloud. How badly do you want to keep this memory? And how much are you willing to pay to remain? Connor proposed to Lydia on Thursday night. I did not know that until my mother told me over the phone from the engagement celebration. What I learned was that the proposal had not caused the disaster. The disaster had been organized afterward. My mother created a family group chat without me. Mara agreed to move her birthday dinner to next Sunday. She wrote, "She is disappointed, but she will be fine. Please do not message her about it. I will handle everything." To Lydia, she told a different story. "Mara was called into the hospital," she said. "Your sister told us to go ahead without her. Then, on Friday evening, my mother answered my call and promised the opposite. 'Of course everyone will be there,' she said. 'Stop worrying so much.'" 3 versions of the same weekend existed before I sat down at Harlow and Finch. My mother was the only person who knew all 3. At the engagement dinner, the private room at the Beaumont Hotel had been arranged with flowers, champagne, and a photographer Connor's mother had hired. Lydia wore the ring. Connor's parents sat near her. My father stood at the bar. Aunt Diane was telling people how surprised Lydia had been. At 6:50, my message appeared in the family chat. "I'm in the back room. The table is under my name." My mother saw it first. Lydia saw it seconds later. Lydia looked at the screen. Then across the room at me, in the photograph beside my contact name. She walked to my mother and held out the phone. "I thought Mara was at the hospital." My mother barely looked at the message. "Do not ruin tonight," she whispered. "I will call your sister." Lydia looked around the room. She saw Connor's parents smiling beside the champagne. She saw the photographer waiting near the flowers. She saw the diamond on her hand, and my mother watching her with the proud, satisfied expression Lydia had spent her life trying to keep. Then she locked the phone and placed it face down. That was Lydia's most important choice that night. She had not invented the lie, but once she understood it, she chose the benefits of the lie over the person it was hurting. When I called my mother at 8:20, she did not sound cruel. That would have been easier. She sounded calm, affectionate, almost reasonable. After explaining the engagement, she said, "I thought you were the most mature person in this family. I knew you would understand." I stared at the 7 empty chairs. It seems I am only considered mature when everyone needs me to lose something. For 1 second, my mother said nothing. Then her voice changed. "Now you are making this uncomfortable. Mara, everyone is celebrating. This is not the time." She had lied to me, left me waiting, and still managed to make my reaction the disturbance. 2 days later, Aunt Diane called me. Her apology came nervously. "I am so sorry about the restaurant," she said. "Your mother told us you had agreed to move it." "I never agreed to anything." The silence on her end became heavy. "She said you were disappointed, but that you understood." I confirmed the dinner with her Friday night. Diane inhaled sharply. "Your mother said you agreed." That was when the shape of the evening changed. Not everyone had planned to abandon me. Most of them had accepted my mother's version because accepting it was easier than checking with me. She had controlled the information, and the family had spent years treating her version of events as official. That did not make them innocent. It meant they had become comfortable letting one person decide what everyone else was allowed to know. And Lydia had known enough to stop it. She had chosen not to. After the call with my mother ended, I paid the reservation charge and tipped the waiter more than the empty table required. I asked him to box the cake before he cleared anything. I took one photograph of the 8 place settings, the untouched forks, and the candle beside my name. Outside, rain tapped against the restaurant windows. I carried the cake to my car with both hands while my phone vibrated inside my coat. Jasmine had called 3 times. I sat behind the wheel and considered driving home, placing the cake in my refrigerator and ending the evening alone in my dark kitchen. Then her message arrived. Do not go home. Address coming. You are not ending your birthday in a dark kitchen. I read it twice. All my life, I had been the first person my family called when something broke, someone became ill, or a problem needed solving. But when joy entered the room, I was the last person they remembered. Before starting the car, I looked at my key ring. My house key rested beside the small brass key to Rose's cottage. I did not know yet that both keys were about to mean something entirely different. Jasmine was still at the hospital when her address appeared on my phone. She could not leave the unit. A child had been admitted, and the night team was short, but in less than 40 minutes, she had called 2 coworkers who were off, texted someone who had just finished the day shift, and asked her 14-year-old daughter, Kayla, to unlock the back gate and turn on the string lights. When I arrived, the party looked nothing like my dinner. There was a folding table under the lights, paper plates beside a tray of tamales, an old speaker balanced on a chair, and 3 people arguing about the birthday playlist. The cake from Harlow and Finch sat in the center, inside its cardboard box. 2 nurses who were heading in for the night shift stopped by for 20 minutes before work. Another coworker arrived wearing sweatpants and carrying a bag of ice. Jasmine joined us by video from the hospital break room, her face framed by vending machines and fluorescent light. No one asked me to arrange anything. No one handed me plates or asked where the candles were. One of the nurses, Elena, pulled out a chair and looked at me. Do you want to help set things up? She asked. Or do you want to sit tonight? The questions stopped me. All my life. Entering a room had meant searching for the work that needed doing. I looked at the chair, then at the people opening containers and laughing without needing instructions from me. I think tonight I want to sit, I said, so I did. They sang badly. We cut the cake with a plastic knife. Kayla insisted on taking pictures, including one where everyone leaned toward the folding table while I laughed with raspberry filling on my thumb. By the end of the night, I had 2 photographs from the same birthday. The first showed a restaurant table set for 8, with 7 empty chairs and untouched silverware. The second showed a cheap table crowded with coworkers who had rearranged their evening in less than 90 minutes. I did not post either photograph that night. The next morning, I woke to 43 new pictures in the family group chat. Lydia's ring appeared from every angle. There were photographs of champagne, flowers, Connor's parents, and my mother smiling beside the engagement cake as if she had planned the proposal herself. Then a private message from Evelyn arrived. Remember to congratulate your sister. It will look strange if you are the only one who says nothing. There was no mention of my birthday, no apology, no question about where I had gone after the restaurant. My remaining responsibility was to protect the appearance of a happy family. I opened the two photographs and placed them side by side. The caption was short. I turned 35 this weekend. I reserved a table for 8. My family had other plans, so people who had just worked 12-hour shifts pulled chairs into a backyard and gave me a birthday party in less than 90 minutes. Thank you to the people who showed up. In the end, maybe love is simply that. I did not mention the engagement dinner. I did not name my mother. I did not describe the lie. I did not name Lydia. I set the post to friends only and pressed publish. At first, the responses came from nurses. Then parents of children I had cared for began leaving messages. One mother, whose son had spent 9 days in our unit, shared the post publicly. This woman stood beside my family during the worst 9 days of our lives. Happy birthday, Mara. Aunt Diane added a heart beneath it. Someone from my mother's church recognized the Whitmore name. Then another person did. The post did not spread across the country. It reached something more dangerous. The few hundred people before whom my mother had spent 30 years building the image of a flawless family. Coworkers thanked me for things I barely remembered doing. Parents described nights when I had stayed after my shift. 2 women from the church asked whether I was Evelyn Whitmore's daughter. Aunt Diane began calling relatives and comparing what each person had been told. Lydia texted me before noon. Did you really have to do this during my engagement weekend? I read the message and placed my phone face down. I did not answer. For most of my life, my silence had been counted as agreement. For the first time, it was being counted as a threat. By Tuesday evening, the post had stopped growing, but the damage had already reached exactly where my mother feared it would. At 9 o'clock, headlights swept across my living room wall. My mother's sedan stopped outside. Evelyn still had the spare key I had given her 10 years earlier. When I first started working nights, I heard the lock turn. She did not knock. My mother had never knocked on doors she still believed belonged to her. Evelyn entered my house holding her phone like a legal document. Dad followed 2 steps behind her, quiet, his coat still buttoned. My mother did not ask whether I was all right. She did not mention the restaurant, the empty chairs, or the cake. She opened a note she had already written. There was a scheduling misunderstanding, she read. Our family celebrated Mara privately, and we regret that her post created the wrong impression. We love one another and are moving forward. She looked up. You will delete the post, publish this correction, congratulate Lydia publicly, and stop discussing private family matters with relatives. I stared at her. You told me everyone was coming. You told them I had changed the date. Both things cannot be true. My mother's expression barely shifted. I did what any mother would do to keep her family from being divided. Behind her, Dad's attention moved around the room. The little menus I had printed were still stacked on the side table. The cake box sat almost full on the kitchen counter. Beside it lay an unused candle and the restaurant receipt. He picked up one of the menus. How long did you sit there? He asked. Thomas, the amount of time is not the issue, my mother said. I looked directly at him. 2 hours. Dad lowered the menu. He did not defend me, but something in his face changed, as if a fact he had avoided had finally become too solid to step around. Evelyn turned back to me. I always thought you were the child who did not need taking care of. I do not need to be rescued, Mom, but sometimes I need to be remembered. Her voice became softer. Family has to know how to forgive. In this family, the word family usually appears right before someone asks me to surrender my share. She flinched, then recovered. Take the post down. No. The word was quiet. That made it stronger. My mother buttoned the top of her coat. You have no idea what you are about to lose. The next morning, I called a locksmith. I did not announce it. I simply replaced the lock whose spare key my mother had treated like permanent access to my life. Then I opened the shared family calendar I had managed for years. It contained Dad's appointments, my mother's committee meetings, Lydia's venue tours, Aunt Diane's insurance deadlines, and every birthday except mine, which I had entered myself. I turned off the shared access. I stopped sending reminders. I disabled location sharing with my mother. I stopped answering calls during work or sleep unless someone left a message. I did not write a declaration about boundaries. I only stopped performing tasks no one had noticed I was doing. The system began to fail almost immediately. My mother texted, "Your father has an appointment Tuesday. You never sent the address." "The information is in the clinic email," I replied. "You know your father is not good with these things." "I know, but that does not make every part of his life my responsibility." I sent Dad the clinic number directly. I was not abandoning him. I was refusing to remain my mother's unpaid administrative department. Evelyn did not answer me. Instead, she began calling other people. By the end of the week, the family story had changed. Mara was exhausted. The hospital was affecting her judgment. The family was deeply worried. The birthday post had been an impulsive reaction. Private matters should never have been placed online. 2 cousins contacted me. "Your mother is hurting," one said. "Maybe you should smooth this over." No one asked whether I was hurting. That was the elegance of my mother's version. My pain became evidence that something was wrong with me. Her pain became proof that I had done something wrong to her. On Thursday night, Dad sent me a message. "Your mother told me you agreed to move the dinner. I did not know you were still at the restaurant." I read it several times before replying. "You may not have known beforehand, but after I sent the message, you did not ask." The typing indicator appeared, vanished, and returned. "Finally," he wrote, "you are right." There was no defense, no explanation, and no request that I forgive him. It was the smallest sentence he could have sent. It was also the first time he had allowed my version of an event to stand without placing my mother's version beside it. A week later, 3 things arrived within the same hour. The mail brought an invitation to my parents' 40th anniversary celebration at Fairview Country Club. Lydia texted, asking whether she could come to my house alone. Then I found a thick envelope from the law office that administered Rose's family trust. I placed all 3 on my kitchen table: an invitation, a request to talk, and a legal envelope. They looked unrelated, but I knew they were asking the same question. How much was I still willing to pay to be allowed back in again? Lydia arrived on Saturday morning without makeup and without the engagement ring displayed like a trophy. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and the expression of someone who had rehearsed several explanations and trusted none of them. For the first 10 minutes, she talked about traffic, Connor's parents, and the weather. I let her continue until the silence between us became heavier than the words. Finally, she looked at her hands. "When you texted from the restaurant, I knew Mom had lied." I kept my voice level. "When did you know?" "Before everyone raised their glasses." "And what did you do?" Lydia swallowed. "I put my phone down." There it was. Not confusion, not ignorance. A choice. She said she had been afraid of humiliating Connor in front of his parents. She did not want to destroy the engagement dinner or turn the proposal into a family argument. More quietly, she admitted something else. "I thought if I challenged Mom in front of everyone, she would start looking at me the way she has always looked at you." I watched her face. "I have lived inside this game so long," she said, "that I started believing winning meant I was safe." Being afraid of Mom does not make you innocent, I told her. It only explains why you chose what you chose. Lydia nodded. She did not ask me to forgive her. Then she delivered my mother's offer. At my parents' 40th anniversary celebration, I would stand and say a few warm words. I would thank them for everything they had done. I would describe the past few weeks as a misunderstanding that had grown larger than anyone intended. I would not have to use the word apology. Afterward, I would be invited to Lydia's wedding, added back to the family chat, and welcomed into Sunday dinners again. Everything would return to normal. "It is 20 minutes," Lydia said. "You stand up, say something kind, and then everyone can move forward." "Move forward?" I asked. "Or pretend it never happened?" She did not answer. Before leaving, Lydia paused beside the door and said, Mom had chosen the anniversary photographs. She had prepared a place for me near the front table where everyone could see us together. My presence, Lydia admitted, was meant to prove the family had healed. I realized the speech was not reconciliation. It was a photograph arranged in advance. After Lydia left, I opened the envelope from the trust attorney. The first page said the trust was considering selling Rose's cottage. The next contained a market appraisal and a list of expected repairs, the roof, the porch supports, electrical work, insurance, and winter maintenance. Behind those pages was a check. It reimbursed every dollar of property tax I had paid over 6 years. The final document stated that accepting the payment would settle any claim related to those voluntary expenses. I understood how my mother had learned about the payments. The trust had hired a new accountant, and 6 years of county records showed that the taxes had been paid from my account instead of the trust's. The following Monday, I met with an attorney named Nia Brooks. She explained the situation without hiding behind legal language. Because Lydia and I were remainder beneficiaries, I could request financial records and challenge misconduct. Paying the taxes did not make me an owner. If the trust allowed the trustee to sell property at fair market value, my mother could do so. I could object if there was fraud, self-dealing, or a sale below value. I could not force the trust to keep a cottage because I loved it. "You are not completely without rights," Nia said. "But the right you have is not the right to keep this particular house." The check, she explained, was a clean way to remove the financial debt between the trust and me. But the money had never been the point. I remembered afternoons at Rose's cottage when she let me sit on the porch swing for hours. She never asked me to wash dishes, pick vegetables, set the table, or pretend to be cheerful. "You do not have to do anything to be here," she once told me. That was why I had paid the taxes. I had not been paying to preserve a building. I had been paying to preserve proof that there had once been a place where I did not have to earn the right to exist. That evening, my mother sent a message. "Selling is the responsible decision. Of course, if the family becomes close again and develops a real plan to use the cottage, I could reconsider when to list it." She never wrote that I had to apologize. She never threatened me directly. Nothing in the message was illegal. The meaning was still unmistakable. I placed the check on my kitchen table. My mother was willing to repay every dollar I had spent. The only thing she could never reimburse was the reason I had spent it. In Rose's old document box, I found a photograph of my mother at 16. Evelyn stood beside a piano trophy in a white recital dress. Her smile was tight, almost painful. Behind her stood her mother, one hand resting on Evelyn's shoulder with the firmness of someone claiming a result. Folded behind the photograph was a letter Rose had written but never mailed. She described a girl who practiced piano 4 hours every day while her mother timed each session. Scores were written on a board in the kitchen. First place brought praise. Second place brought silence. Evelyn had learned to fear losing before she was old enough to understand what winning meant. I sat on the floor and read the letter twice. My mother had not been born believing love was a marketplace. She had been raised inside one. She survived by learning to stand beside the winner, control the story, and never be the person left outside the photograph. Then she built the same system around her daughters. Understanding what had eaten away at my mother did not make the bite marks on me disappear. That evening, Evelyn changed her tone. "This has gone on long enough," she wrote. "Your father misses you. Lydia wants you beside her at the wedding. One day, when you have children, you will understand why I have tried so hard to keep this family together. Come Saturday and say a few words from the heart. Everything will be forgiven, forgiven." The word told me she still believed I was the person who had done something wrong. Even so, the message reached every weak place in me. My father, Lydia's wedding, children I did not have, Rose's cottage, the possibility that there might still be a way back if I used the right words. I opened my laptop and wrote the apology. It thanked my parents for their sacrifices. It described the birthday as a misunderstanding that had grown larger than anyone intended. It said families were complicated. It accepted responsibility for placing a private conflict online. It promised that I was ready to move forward. When I finished, I read it aloud in my kitchen. It was warm, gracious, and beautifully written. 35 years of practice had made me an expert at apologizing for things other people had done to me. For several minutes, I almost believed it. The speech offered everything I had wanted: a seat at the wedding, my father's voice on Sundays, summer at the cottage, and the illusion that pain could be erased if I arranged my sentences carefully enough. I had spent my life mistaking surrender for peace, because surrender always ended the argument. I saved the speech and went to work. That night, one of my patients was a 6-year-old girl recovering from heart surgery. Her mother was 24 and worked at a packaging warehouse. Every evening, she came straight from her shift, still smelling faintly of cardboard and machine oil. The room was crowded with wires, monitors, and tubing. The mother was afraid to touch anything, so she held her daughter's foot through the blanket. Near 3 in the morning, I found her asleep upright in the chair, both hands still wrapped around that small foot. There was no camera, no post, no audience. No one was there to praise her for staying. I stood in the doorway and watched love exist without witnesses. That was when the truth became simple. Love did not become real because someone saw it. And love that had to be earned through performance was not love, it was wages. After my shift, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot. Morning light was beginning to touch the roof of the garage. I opened the apology on my phone. Then I deleted every word. I did not read it again. I sent my mother one message. "I will be there Saturday." Her response arrived almost immediately. "Wonderful. Wear the blue dress." She believed she had won. At home. I removed Rose's cottage key from my key ring. It left a small space beside my house key and hospital badge. I placed the key inside a large envelope. Then I added 6 years of property tax receipts, the uncashed reimbursement check, and a copy of the attorney's letter. I was not planning a public confrontation. I intended to give the envelope to my mother privately after the anniversary dinner, then leave. That afternoon, Dad called. "Your mother says you are giving a speech. Are you calling to ask what I plan to say?" "No," he answered. "I am calling to ask whether you really want to come." I looked at the sealed envelope on my table. I need to finish something. Saturday evening. I arrived at Fairview Country Club, wearing the blue dress my mother had chosen. I was dressed correctly for the old role, but inside my purse was an ending no one else would be allowed to write. Fairview Country Club looked exactly like the kind of room my mother trusted. Polished wood, white linens, and 90 people arranged beneath warm lights. Church friends filled the front tables. Members of her garden club sat beside old neighbors. Connor's family occupied the seats nearest the band. Every detail had been selected to photograph well. Gold lettering above the dance floor, flowers matching my mother's dress, and place cards written by hand. Even the light seemed trained to flatter the version of our family she wanted everyone to remember on that evening. A three-piece group played softly near the windows. A two-tier anniversary cake stood beside a screen showing family photographs. The printed program listed dinner, dancing, and family toasts. My name was not there. I believed I could stay through the meal, give my mother the envelope privately, and leave without turning the evening into a public reckoning. Then Evelyn took the microphone. She spoke beautifully. 40 years of marriage, difficult seasons survived together, raising 2 daughters, the importance of loyalty. Her voice never shook. Photographs moved across the screen behind her. Lydia at graduation, Lydia at recitals, Lydia holding out her engagement ring. In some pictures, I stood near the edge. In others, I was absent entirely. My mother smiled toward the room. "Families are tested," she said, "but real daughters always find their way home." Then she turned toward me. "Mara, I believe you have a few words you would like to share." 90 faces moved in my direction. My mother believed my presence meant surrender. For 1 second, I could almost hear the apology I had deleted. I could speak it from memory. I could refuse, remain seated, and become the daughter who ruined her parents' anniversary. Or I could tell the truth. I took the envelope from my purse and walked forward. When I reached the microphone, I used the same calm voice I used with frightened parents at 3 in the morning. 40 years of marriage is real, I began. I respect the years my parents have built together. My mother relaxed slightly. "But Mom has always said we must show up where it matters. I tried to do that my whole life. I remembered appointments, read contracts, drove people, handled insurance, and paid bills no one else remembered. I became the easiest person in this family to need, and I mistook that for being the person most deeply loved." The room changed. I placed the envelope beside the cake. 6 years ago, when the taxes on Grandma Rose's cottage went unpaid, I paid them. I kept paying because that cottage was the only place I remembered being allowed to exist without doing anything useful. I opened the envelope and removed the brass key, the receipts, and the uncashed check. Mom reimbursed every dollar. So tonight, I am returning what I tried to buy with that money, the hope that if I did enough, I would finally be treated like a daughter instead of an employee. My mother stepped toward me. "Mara, that is enough." From near the bar, Dad spoke. "Evelyn, let her finish." He did not rescue me. He did not correct 35 years of silence. He simply stopped helping her erase my words in the present. I looked at my parents. I have not stopped loving this family. I have stopped using myself as proof of that love. Then I said the sentence I had carried into the room without knowing whether I would need it. "Love that requires a time clock is only wages. I am quitting." No one moved. "You can sell the cottage," I continued. "You can keep the check. You can tell any story you choose about tonight. But from now on, Mom, you will not be the only person allowed to tell it." I placed the microphone back in its stand and walked toward the ballroom doors. No one applauded. The silence did not feel like defeat. It meant they had heard me. Outside, my hands began to shake. I was reaching for my car when the doors opened behind me. Lydia crossed the parking lot carrying a wooden recipe box against her chest. "Mom was going to throw this away while clearing the cottage," she said. I took it. I recognized Rose's handwriting on the faded cards. Lydia held the box toward me. "I know this does not fix the birthday." "No," I said, "it does not." "But you should still have it." I took the box. "Thank you for choosing correctly this time, even if it is too late to make the wrong thing never happen." Lydia nodded. We did not hug. She returned to the ballroom, and I placed Rose's recipes on the passenger seat. I drove home without turning on the radio. The silence inside the car was the first quiet I had ever heard that did not carry anyone else's name. Several months later, Rose's cottage was sold. The money remained inside the trust. I did not win the house or force anyone to admit the sale was cruel. When I learned that the buyers were a young couple with 3 children and a golden retriever, the news hurt. Still, I pictured those children running through the yard. "I hope they wear the porch swing out," I told Jasmine. My mother continued attending church and garden club meetings. She kept friends, committees, invitations, and familiar places to belong. Her version of the anniversary night was that I had gone through a period of emotional instability and embarrassed the family. But her words no longer became truth simply because she spoke first. Aunt Diane began checking stories before repeating them. Some women at church paused before agreeing with Evelyn. Lydia stopped forwarding my messages to our mother. Dad called me without asking permission. My mother did not lose her entire life. She lost her monopoly on the story. Dad called on the first Sunday of every month. We talked about the hospital, old cars, the cottage, and the weather. He never gave me the apology I once needed. I never pretended our relationship had become something larger than it was. It was a bridge wide enough for 2 people, and we learned not to carry the whole family across it. Lydia's wedding took place the following spring. I was not invited after refusing to apologize. I nearly drove to the hotel anyway. I sat in my car with the address open on my phone, then closed the map and drove to a garden center instead. Jasmine met me near the seed racks. "What do you want to plant today?" she asked. "Something that can survive the winter." I had not completely forgiven Lydia. Rose's recipe box still rested in my kitchen, though, and that meant a bridge remained between us. No one was forcing us to cross it before we were ready. My 36th birthday arrived on a warm Saturday. The backyard filled with Jasmine and her daughter, nurses from my unit, a family whose child I had once cared for, my elderly neighbor, and friends from outside the hospital. My coworkers had pooled their money to build me a long wooden table with 8 seats. "The number was intentional," Jasmine said, "and maybe slightly cruel," I laughed. Zinnias grew along the fence from seeds inside Rose's recipe box. For once, I did not arrange every plate, check every dish, remind anyone to arrive on time, or remain in the kitchen while everyone else sat outside. Someone pulled out a chair. "Mara, your place is here." No one asked me to perform a task to keep it. At sunset, someone took a photograph. All 8 chairs were occupied. I was laughing. The zinnias were bright behind us, and Rose's lemon cake sat in the center of the table. I never posted that picture. A year earlier, I had needed a photograph to prove what happened. This year, I needed no proof. Some photographs are not evidence. They are simply your life happening while you are finally present for it. For most of my life, I thought freedom meant someone would eventually save me a chair at their table. I was wrong. Freedom was walking away from the table where I kept being asked to earn my place and learning to build one of my own. Being needed can make you feel important, but only when someone loves you without requiring your service do you understand what belonging feels like. Have you ever realized that someone needed what you did for them but never truly valued you? Share your story in the comments. Your words may help another person understand that they do not have to keep paying for a seat. Send this story to someone who always shows up for others but forgets to save a place for themselves. Subscribe for more stories about family, boundaries, and finding your way back to your own worth. I was no longer the daughter who had to earn a place at the table. I was simply Mara, and for the first time, that was enough.